The black briefcase landed on the stainless steel counter at exactly 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the time because my phone was lying face up beside the quarterly inventory report. I remember the sound of the metal latches opening. I remember the smell of fresh bread coming from the ovens and the way every employee in the kitchen suddenly found a reason to leave. But most of all, I remember Shin Jaemin's face. He stood across from me in a charcoal suit, rain still shining on his shoulders. 4 men waited behind him near the kitchen entrance. They wore black coats, expressionless faces, and the kind of stillness that made people lower their voices without being told. The city called Jaemin a restaurant billionaire. People who understood how the city really worked called him something else. The Korean Mafia boss who controlled 12 restaurants, 3 private clubs, 2 shipping warehouses, and enough powerful men to make problems disappear before they reached a courtroom. For 4 years, I had managed the legitimate financial structure holding his empire together. And for 1 quiet, complicated year, I had loved him. Jaemin opened the briefcase. Inside was a certified cashier S-check for $1 million. Beneath it was a 6-page agreement. I did not touch either one. "What is this?" I asked. "You know what it is." His voice was controlled, but his right hand tightened once at his side. That was Jaemin's only visible weakness. When he was angry, afraid, or lying, his right hand closed as though he were holding something nobody else could see. I looked down at the agreement. The first page required me to resign immediately. The second prohibited me from entering any Shin Enterprises property. The remaining pages demanded that I release all claims involving compensation, ownership, inheritance, partnership rights, or undisclosed equity connected to the company's past or present operations. That final part told me everything. This was not severance. It was hush money. "You want me to disappear," I said. "I want you out of the city before midnight." Behind him, one of his men looked away. I lifted my eyes to Jaemin. "Why?" He did not answer immediately. Through the small kitchen window, I could see a black luxury sedan waiting at the curb. A woman sat in the back seat, Yoona Han, the daughter of one of the most powerful Korean business families in the country. Her father controlled the shipping consortium Jaemin needed to expand his operation beyond the city. 3 nights earlier, photographs of Jaemin and Yoona leaving a private engagement dinner had appeared online. He had not called me. He had not explained. Now he was standing inside the kitchen we had once shared after midnight, offering me $1 million to remove myself from his life. "Her family made it a condition," I said. His jaw shifted. That was answer enough. Yoona did not want the black woman who knew Jaemin's accounts, his private numbers, his weaknesses, and the combination to every financial safe standing anywhere near her future husband. "You could have spoken to me," I said. "This is me speaking to you." "No, this is you paying me because you are too much of a coward to say the truth." One of the guards took a step forward. Jaemin raised one finger, stopping him. For 1 second, the controlled mask slipped. Pain moved across Jaemin's face so quickly that another person might have missed it. I did not. Then his expression went cold again. "Take the money, Ada." He pushed the briefcase toward me. "Build a life somewhere else." 4 years. That was what 4 years of loyalty was worth to him. $1 million and an order to disappear. I closed the briefcase. I lifted it from the counter. And I smiled. Jaemin's eyes narrowed. He had expected tears, anger, begging, maybe even a confession that I loved him. What he did not expect was for me to look almost relieved. "You remaking a mistake," I said. "I have already made my decision. I wasn't talking about me." I walked past him. His men moved out of my way. Before I reached the door, Jaemin called my name. "Ada." I stopped but did not turn around. "Do not come back." I looked over my shoulder. "You should have investigated my last name before you handed me that check." For the first time that morning, Shin Jaemin looked afraid. Then I left. My father, Adaeze Okafor, had been dead for 11 years. But the truth he left behind was very much alive. 23 years earlier, before Shin Enterprises owned restaurants with marble entrances and private dining rooms, it had been 3 men sitting around a scratched wooden table. Shin Jaemin's father brought connections. Elder Cho brought political protection. My father brought the financial model, the first supplier contracts, and most of the legitimate investment capital. Marcus Okafor owned 12% of the original company. 6 months after the founding agreement was signed, Jaemin's father created a false debt, claimed my father had failed to meet his obligations, and transferred his ownership into a shell company controlled by the Shin family. My father challenged it. Records vanished. Witnesses changed their stories. Attorneys stopped returning his calls. He was not physically threatened. Men like the Shin family did not always need to threaten people directly. Sometimes they simply closed every door until surrender felt like the only reasonable option. My father never surrendered. He kept everything. Original contracts, bank confirmations, signed partnership minutes, letters showing that his investment had been received, and one handwritten document in which Jaemin's father admitted the transfer was temporary and would be corrected after a licensing investigation ended. It never was. My father spent the rest of his life working as a bookkeeper. He died without seeing his name restored. But before he died, he gave me a blue folder. "You will know when the time is right," he told me. At 19, I thought he meant I should find an attorney immediately. At 25, I understood what he had really meant. Evidence was powerful. But evidence combined with timing could bring down an empire. I accepted a junior accounting position at Shin Enterprises under my real name, Adaeze Okafor. Jaemin never connected me to Marcus because his father had removed my father's name from every public version of the company's history. The stolen ownership appeared only through an old holding trust called M.O. Development. To Jaemin, I was simply an overqualified financial assistant who noticed mistakes before his senior managers did. Within 8 months, I had been promoted. Within 2 years, I was controlling budgets for all 12 restaurants. By the 4th year, nothing major moved through Shin Enterprises without passing across my desk. I did not steal information. I did not alter accounts. I did not sabotage anything. I simply learned. And while I learned the empire, I learned Jaemin too. That had been my greatest mistake. The first time I saw the man beneath the reputation was at 2 in the morning after a supplier crisis. A refrigeration system had failed at the central kitchen, threatening nearly $300,000 in inventory. Jaemin arrived with 6 guards and enough anger to silence an entire building. I expected him to fire someone. Instead, he removed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and spent 3 hours moving boxes beside the kitchen employees. When the crisis was over, he found me alone in the office correcting invoices. "You should go home," he said. "So should you. This is my company, and these are my numbers." He stared at me for several seconds. Then he smiled. It was not the public smile he used at openings and charity dinners. It was smaller, realer. He returned 15 minutes later with 2 bowls of noodles and sat across from me on the office floor. That was how it began. Not with obsession, not with declarations, with midnight meals, exhausted conversations, and the dangerous comfort of being understood. Jaemin told me he hated what his father had built around him. He said he wanted to turn the restaurants into something clean enough that he could someday walk away from everything else. I wanted to believe him. One night, while rain struck the windows of his private office, he reached across the desk and covered my hand with his. "When this is over," he said, "I want to build something that belongs to me. Not my father. Not the council. Me." I should have asked what this meant. Instead, I asked, would I be part of it? His thumb moved across my knuckles. "You are already part of everything." For almost a year, we lived inside that unfinished sentence. No promises, no public relationship, just the way he searched for me when he entered a room. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The way he stood beside me at my father's grave on the anniversary of his death, holding an umbrella over both of us without asking questions. I believed silence meant depth. I did not understand that sometimes silence was simply where cowardice hid. Yuna understood before I did. At a charity dinner 2 months before the briefcase appeared, she found me alone near the ballroom terrace. She wore red. She smiled without warmth. "Jaemin trusts you," she said. "I manage his finances. You manage more than that." I said nothing. She moved closer. Men like Jaemin do not marry women who know all their secrets. They marry women whose families can protect them from those secrets. Then you have nothing to worry about. Her smile widened. I don't worry, Miss Okafor. I remove uncertainty. 3 days later, Jaemin stopped calling me after midnight. 2 months later, the briefcase landed on my counter. I drove directly to my grandmother S house. Nana Ruth opened the door before I knocked. She looked at the briefcase, then at my face. What did that man do? I placed the briefcase on her kitchen table and opened it. She read the amount on the cashier S check. $1 million? To leave the city. Nana Ruth looked at me carefully. Are you leaving? No. Are you cashing it? No. That seemed to satisfy her. She placed a bowl of jollof rice in front of me and sat down. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said, Your father always said truth has roots. A dishonest man can cut down the tree, but he cannot reach what is growing beneath the ground. I removed the release agreement from the briefcase. The section about inheritance and undisclosed ownership had been written too carefully to be accidental. Jaemin knew there was a problem buried in the company S history. Maybe he did not know I was Marcus Okafor's daughter when he hired me. But by the morning, he offered me $1 million. He knew enough to try to purchase my silence. I called Miss Park. She had spent 17 years handling corporate fraud and hidden ownership cases before opening her own firm. I had consulted her quietly once before, 2 years earlier, but I had not been ready to act. Now I was. She arrived at Nana Ruth's house that afternoon. She read the agreement twice. Then she examined my father's documents. Finally, she looked at the unsigned cashier S check. This check is not generosity, she said. It is evidence that they believe you may have a claim. Can we prove it? We can prove enough to begin discovery. How long? If they cooperate, months. They won tea. No, she said. They will panic. I pushed the blue folder toward her. What happens when powerful men panic? Miss Park smiled. They make expensive mistakes. If you have ever been dismissed by someone who benefited from your work, type invisible in the comments. Because being unseen and being powerless are not the same thing. I never deposited Jaemin's SEC. I placed it in a secure evidence vault at Miss Park's office. Then we filed suit. We did not claim that my father had been treated unfairly. Fairness was an opinion. We claimed fraudulent transfer, continuing concealment, breach of partnership agreement, and unlawful enrichment. The age of the fraud did not protect Shin Enterprises because the concealment had never stopped. Every annual corporate filing that excluded my father's ownership repeated the deception. Miss Park also requested an emergency injunction preventing the company from selling, transferring, or borrowing against assets connected to the disputed 12% stake. The judge granted a temporary order. That was the first crack. Shin Enterprises had used its restaurant properties and holding company shares as collateral for aggressive expansion loans. Once the ownership of those assets became disputed, the banks demanded explanations. The $200 million partnership with Una-S family was placed under review. 2 lenders froze new credit. 3 investors requested independent audits. The empire did not fall that first week, but it stopped moving. For a company built on constant expansion, stopping was the beginning of death. Jaemin called me 23 times in 2 days. I answered none of them. On the 3rd evening, he arrived at Miss Park's office. 6 black vehicles filled the street. His men remained outside. Jaemin entered alone. He found me in the conference room with financial reports spread across the table. You filed against me, he said. I filed against stolen ownership. You knew who your father was when you came to work for me. I knew who my father was every day of my life. You entered my company under false intentions. I used my real name. I completed every job you gave me. I tripled your revenue and cleaned financial systems your senior executives had neglected for years. His eyes hardened. You were investigating me. No, I was waiting to see what kind of man you would become when the truth reached your door. And now you have your answer? I looked at him. You brought it to me in a briefcase. He placed both hands on the conference table. Withdraw the claim. No, I will increase the offer. I don't want your money. 5 million. No. 10. You still think this is a negotiation about my price. Everything has a price. That is what your father believed when he stole from mine. The room became dangerously quiet. Jaemin moved around the table until he was standing directly in front of me. For the first time, I could see exhaustion beneath his controlled expression. If the Han partnership collapses, people more dangerous than you understand will come after everything connected to me. Then perhaps you should not have built your future on stolen property. I was trying to keep you away from this. I almost laughed. You paid me to disappear. I was protecting you. No, you were protecting your merger. His face tightened. Yuna S. family would never have accepted you beside me, and you decided their acceptance mattered more than my dignity. I did what I had to do. That sentence has protected cruel men for generations. He reached toward my hand but stopped before touching me. Ada, I stepped back. You taught me never to bring emotion into a negotiation, so hear my answer clearly. I looked straight into his eyes. No. Director Cho lasted 19 days. The man Jaemin had hired to replace me discovered that financial systems do not run themselves simply because their creator is no longer in the building. He missed a renewal deadline for 4 major produce vendors. He misunderstood a variable interest clause in 2 restaurant leases. He submitted a quarterly forecast that overstated available cash by nearly $12 million. None of that was sabotage. I had left every file exactly where it belonged. But systems require knowledge, judgment, and memory. Jaemin had paid to remove all 3. Yuna called me next. Unlike Jaemin, she did not pretend the conversation was personal. You are damaging thousands of innocent people, she said. I am correcting an ownership fraud. You know what will happen if the partnership fails. Yes, your family will walk away. You believe Jaemin will choose you after this? I leaned back in my chair. This is not about being chosen. It has always been about that. No, Yuna. That is the difference between us. You wanted the man. I want the truth. Her voice sharpened. You will never work in this city again. I already have 3 companies requesting meetings. She went silent. For 4 years, Jaemin had introduced my work as his leadership. Now the financial world was discovering whose hands had actually been on the structure. Before ending the call, Yuna said, "You will regret humiliating him." I looked at the unopened briefcase sitting beside Miss Park's desk. He humiliated himself. 63 days after Jaemin told me not to come back, Shin Enterprises held its largest press event in company history. The Grand Haniel Hotel ballroom was filled with journalists, investors, restaurant executives, and representatives from Yuna S. family. Jaemin stood at the podium beneath a screen displaying the words, Shin Han Global Hospitality Partnership. The proposed deal was worth $200 million. It would refinance Shin Enterprises' debt, expand the restaurant brand into 5 new cities, and secure Jaemin S.'s position for another decade. It was also scheduled to close while his attorneys were still trying to bury my father's ownership claim. At 9:45 that morning, I entered the ballroom. I wore a cream suit. Miss Park walked beside me. 2 members of her legal team followed behind us carrying sealed audit summaries. And in my right hand, I carried the black briefcase. Jaemin saw me before anyone else did. His words stopped in the middle of a sentence. The cameras turned. Yuna stood from her seat near the stage. "What is she doing here?" she demanded. I continued walking. Jaemin's security moved toward me, but he raised his hand. The same silent command he had given inside the kitchen. Let her pass. I reached the front of the ballroom. Jaemin stepped away from the podium. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "You told me not to come back." I placed the briefcase on the presentation table. The click of the latches carried through the silent room. "I came back because you tried to purchase something you never owned." I removed the cashier's check and held it where the cameras could see the amount. $1 million. Gasps moved through the ballroom. This check was offered to me in exchange for my resignation, my silence, and the release of any ownership or inheritance claims connected to Shin Enterprises. Jaemin looked toward his attorneys. They already knew what was coming. My father, Adaeze Okafor, was one of the 3 original founders of this company. He owned 12%. Miss Park's team began distributing the audit summaries. 23 years ago, that ownership was transferred through falsified debt documents into a holding company controlled by the Shin family. Yuna's father opened the report. His expression changed before he reached the second page. The court has already prohibited Shin Enterprises from transferring disputed assets. This morning, our forensic accountants completed an initial tracing of profits connected to my father S. stolen equity. Jaemin stared at me. Ada, stop. I turned toward him. You had 63 days to say my father S. name. The room was completely silent. You had 4 years to ask why an Okafor understood your company better than the men who inherited it. His controlled mask began to break. And you had one final opportunity in that kitchen to tell me the truth. I placed the check on the table in front of him. You chose a briefcase. A journalist called out, Mr. Shin, were you aware of the equity claim when you issued this payment? Jaemin did not answer. Another reporter asked, does the Han family still intend to complete the merger? Yuna S. father closed the audit summary. Our organization will suspend all negotiations immediately. The announcement struck the room like a physical blow. Yuna turned toward him. Father, we are leaving. The Han representatives stood. Investors began speaking urgently into their phones. Jaemin remained in front of me, surrounded by cameras, watching his future walk out of the ballroom. I leaned closer so only he could hear me. You paid me to disappear. His eyes shone with something between fury and regret. What did you expect me to do? He whispered. I expected you to remember who built the floor beneath your feet. Then I walked away. The collapse did not happen in one dramatic moment. Real empires rarely die that way. They die through letters, deadlines, frozen accounts, cancelled contracts, and phone calls that powerful men suddenly cannot get returned. Within 24 hours, the Han consortium formally withdrew. Without the $200 million refinancing deal, Shin Enterprises violated the debt ratio required by its primary lenders. The banks called their loans. Vendors moved the company to cash-on-delivery terms. 3 landlords issued default notices. A financial crimes investigation opened after the forensic audit revealed repeated false ownership declarations. 2 executives resigned. Director Cho disappeared before the emergency board meeting. Jaemin tried to sell 3 restaurant properties, but the court blocked the sale because the buildings were tied to my father S. disputed equity. He offered me $25 million to settle. I refused. He offered 3 flagship restaurants. I refused. I was not trying to take whatever he was willing to hand me. I was forcing the company to return what had already belonged to my family. 5 weeks after the press conference, Shin Enterprises filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. 12 restaurants, 3 private clubs, 2 warehouses, hundreds of millions in reported assets. An empire that had survived rival families, police investigations, economic crashes, and leadership wars finally entered bankruptcy because the woman holding its financial structure had stopped protecting it from the truth. I did not celebrate the employees losing certainty. They had done nothing wrong. So Miss Park and I created Okafor Hospitality Group. The bankruptcy court recognized my father S. 12% ownership interest and approved my claim as one of the largest claims against the estate. Instead of waiting years for cash, I used part of that claim as a credit bid to acquire 5 profitable restaurant locations from the bankrupt company. I kept the employees. I honored the supplier contracts. I promoted the managers Jaemin S. executives had ignored. Above the entrance of the first location, I placed a small bronze plaque. Marcus Okafor, original founder. My father S. name had finally returned to the company he helped build. Not as a footnote, not as a hidden trust, not as a problem someone powerful could erase. As a founder, official, permanent. Jaemin came to see me the night before the first restaurant reopened. No convoy, no guards, no expensive suit. He stood outside in a dark coat while rain moved through the streetlights. For a moment, he looked like the man who had once sat on an office floor eating noodles with me at 2 in the morning. I opened the door but did not invite him inside. The bankruptcy court approved the sale, he said. Yes. You own the flagship location. My father owns it. I am simply the person who brought it home. He looked through the glass at the employees preparing tables. You kept everyone. They did not steal from my father. His eyes lowered. I did not know the entire truth when you first came to work for me. But you knew before you sent the briefcase. Yes. The admission hurt more than I expected. Yuna S. attorneys found the old trust during the merger review, he continued. They told me your father S. claim could destroy the deal. And you chose the deal. I chose the only future I understood. No, You chose the future that required the least courage. He accepted the words without defending himself. I loved you, he said. The rain filled the silence between us. I had imagined hearing those words so many times. In his office. In the kitchen. At my father's grave. But never after his empire was gone. Did you? I asked. Yes. Then why did you hand me a price? Because I knew if I asked you to leave, you wouldn't. If I told you what was coming, you would fight beside me. And I thought making you hate me was the only way to get you away from the Han family. You keep calling control protection. I was wrong. Yes, I should have chosen you. I shook my head. That is still not the lesson. His brow tightened. I never needed you to choose me over Yuna. I needed you to choose honesty over fear. He looked through the glass again. His old restaurant now carried my father's name. Was any of it real? He asked. Mine was. His face tightened as though that answer hurt more than anger would have. He reached toward me, then stopped. The distance between his hand and mine was only a few inches. It felt like 4 years. I am sorry, Ada. I believe you. Hope appeared in his eyes. Then I finished. But regret is not restoration. I stepped back inside. Jaemin remained in the rain as I closed the door. I did not watch him leave. There is a frame on the wall of my office. Inside, it is not the $1 million check. I returned that to Shin Enterprises through the bankruptcy court. What I framed was the small white card Jaemin placed inside the briefcase. Don't come back. Beneath it is a copy of the court order recognizing Adaeze Okafor as an original founder. I look at both whenever someone tells me patience is weakness. Patience is not weakness when you are collecting evidence. Silence is not surrender when you are choosing the right moment to speak. And being invisible does not mean you are insignificant. Sometimes the invisible person is the foundation. And when the foundation walks away, even the most powerful empire eventually learns how much weight she had been carrying. Shin Jaemin offered me $1 million to disappear. I came back with my father's documents. I returned his money. I exposed the theft. I stopped the merger. I called the empire's debts into the light. And 6 weeks later, Shin Enterprises disappeared instead. My father once told me the truth had roots. He was right. The Shin family cut down his tree, but they never reached the roots. I did. And from them, I built something they could never take from us again. Subscribe if you believe the woman they underestimated should be the one who writes the final chapter. My name is Adaeze Okafor. I was never invisible. They were simply too arrogant to look down and see who was holding up their world.